You have been seduced by a lethal romantic delusion. Hollywood and commercial survivalist culture have infected your mind with the image of the lone wolf, the rugged individual who straps on a bug-out bag and vanishes into the wilderness the moment society fractures. This is a white lie that will get you killed within the first 72 hours of a collapse. You must purge this fantasy immediately. The cold reality is that if you step out of your front door without a fully stocked, secure destination and a hardened route to get there, you are not a survivor. You are a refugee. You are a homeless vagrant with a slightly better backpack, a mobile loot box for the first desperate group that spots you. You are voluntarily trading the highest tactical advantage you possess, shelter, for the highest statistical risk in a collapse scenario: exposure. Let us look at the ruthless mathematics of survival. A standard bug-out bag contains at best 3 days of supplies. To survive on the move, you must burn 3 to 5 times the calories you would consume in a static position, all while navigating unpredictable terrain, hostile weather, and human threats. You are increasing your metabolic demand while simultaneously severing yourself from your supply chain. Contrast this with your home. Even an unprepared home offers structural protection from the elements, concealment from line-of-sight observation, and a baseline of caloric reserves that you could never carry on your back. Your home is not just a building, it is a logistics hub. It is a fortress of thermal regulation and psychological stability. Abandoning it based on a vague fear is a tactical error of the highest order. When you abandon your base, you forfeit the advantage of terrain familiarity. Inside your perimeter, you know every sightline, every creaking floorboard, and every lock. You know who belongs in the neighborhood and who does not. The moment you step onto the road, you enter the unknown. Every intersection becomes a potential ambush point. Every stranger is a variable you cannot calculate. The concept of bugging in is often misunderstood by amateurs as a passive act, a refusal to accept reality. This is incorrect. Bugging in is an active, aggressive strategy of spatial control. It is the act of turning a civilian dwelling into a hard target. It allows you to control the hygiene of your environment, manage the security of your resources, and maintain the mental clarity required to make life or death decisions. A clarity that vanishes when you are shivering under a tarp in the woods. Consider the dynamics of human panic. In the initial phase of any collapse, be it a grid-down scenario, a pandemic, or civil unrest, the immediate reaction of the unprepared masses is movement. They will flood the highways, clog the choke points, and strip resources from every gas station and convenience store in their path. By bugging out prematurely, you insert yourself directly into this chaotic equation. You become part of the friction. By staying put, locking down, and enacting strict noise and light discipline, you remove yourself from the primary kill zone. You allow the wave of chaos to wash over and past you. The streets will become hunting grounds where desperate people commit unspeakable acts for a tank of gas or a bottle of water. Your survival probability increases exponentially simply by not being there to be targeted. However, this does not mean you succumb to siege mentality and refuse to move regardless of the situation. Bugging in is a calculated delay, not a suicide pact. It is the strategic choice to utilize your resources to outlast the initial die-off phase. You only abandon the fortress when the mathematical probability of death inside exceeds the probability of death outside. To make this calculation correctly, you must understand the specific nature of the threat. Different collapse scenarios dictate different engagement rules. We will dissect the 4 primary scenarios where your home is your greatest weapon, starting with the most insidious threat, where isolation is the only antidote: the biological collapse. Remember, in a world gone mad, your 4 walls are the only order left. Do not surrender them until the roof is burning above your head. In a biological collapse or a high mortality pandemic, the rules of engagement shift entirely from physical defense to environmental control. The enemy is no longer a human aggressor you can see through a scope. It is a microscopic particulate suspended in the air or lingering on surfaces, waiting for a single lapse in protocol to end your lineage. In this scenario, distance is your armor, and isolation is your shield. The concept of bugging out during a biological event is statistically suicidal. When you travel, you become a vector. You move through contamination zones. You touch fuel pumps that thousands of others have touched, and you interact with a population that is largely asymptomatic but infectious. There is no safe wilderness to escape to if you are carrying the pathogen in your own lungs because you stopped to barter for water on the way out of the city. The only winning move is total, immediate static isolation. Your home must be reimagined not as a residence, but as a level 4 biocontainment unit. The strategic advantage of bugging in here is absolute control over the microbiome of your living space. Outside your walls, the variable R, the reproduction number of the virus, is dictated by the chaotic behavior of the masses. Inside your walls, you have the power to reduce R to 0. This requires a shift in mindset from hospitality to hostile exclusion. You must establish a rigid perimeter that no unauthorized biological material crosses. This means the front door is locked and barricaded, not against looters, but against the very air from the outside world. If you have the capability, you seal vents and create a positive pressure environment, or conversely, create a designated dirty room or airlock at your point of entry where decontamination protocols are religiously enforced. Consider the operational reality of a bug-out scenario in a pandemic. You are forced into refugee camps or roadside settlements where sanitation has collapsed. Dysentery and cholera will kill you faster than the pandemic itself. By staying home, you maintain access to a private sanitation system. As long as the municipal water pressure holds, or you have stocked sufficient water reserves, you can maintain hygiene standards that are impossible on the road. Hygiene is not a luxury in this scenario. It is a survival tactic as critical as ammunition. Washing your hands and sterilizing your living quarters prevents the secondary infections that often claim the lives of those weakened by the primary virus. Your stockpile of bleach, alcohol, and soap becomes more valuable than gold. In the wild, a minor cut becomes gangrenous. At home, it is a managed injury. The psychological component of the biological siege is the hardest to manage. Humans are social creatures, and the instinct to help neighbors or extended family will be overwhelming. You must kill this instinct. In a severe biological collapse, a knocking neighbor is a biological weapon. It sounds heartless, but you must treat anyone outside your immediate pod as a confirmed threat. You cannot verify their infection status. Allowing a single breach of your quarantine bubble negates months of discipline. You must have the discipline to watch the world crumble through your window without opening it. This includes ignoring pleas for help that would require you to break your seal. You are not a doctor. You are a survivor. Your sole responsibility is the preservation of the genetic material inside your fortress. However, even the best fortress can be compromised. You must know exactly when the equation changes and staying becomes a death sentence. The trigger to leave a biological siege is specific and dire. You do not leave because you are bored or running low on food. You ration until starvation is imminent. You leave only when your clean zone has been irrevocably breached. If a member of your internal group becomes infected and you cannot effectively isolate them, the house is no longer a sanctuary. It is an incubator. Furthermore, if the biological agent is waterborne and your independent water supply is contaminated, or if a chemical to biological weapon attack renders the air in your immediate vicinity permanently toxic beyond the capability of your filtration systems, you must move. In that desperate scenario, you are not bugging out to a random location. You are executing a medical evacuation to a pre-planned location with a lower population density, moving fast, wearing full protective gear, PPE, and engaging with no one. But until that red line is crossed, you stay. You lock the door. You wait. In a war against biology, patience is the deadliest weapon you possess. The world outside will eventually burn itself out or recover, but only those who stayed behind their walls will be there to see the aftermath. Civil unrest is the most kinetic and volatile scenario you will face. Unlike a virus or a power outage, a mob has intent. It has a collective intelligence that is predatory, reactionary, and fueled by opportunity. In this scenario, the street is not a path to safety. It is the primary theater of war. If you attempt to bug out during a period of widespread civil disorder, you are driving directly into the fatal funnel. Every bridge, every highway off-ramp, and every intersection becomes a natural choke point where vehicles are stopped, stripped, and burned. A vehicle in a riot is not an asset. It is a steel coffin. It draws attention, limits your mobility to the roadway, and offers zero protection against Molotov cocktails or sustained blunt force trauma. When society is tearing itself apart outside, your greatest tactical error is to voluntarily place yourself in the middle of the friction. By bugging in, you exploit the principle of asymmetry. A mob is fluid. It follows the path of least resistance. It seeks soft targets, storefronts, pedestrians, and vehicles stuck in traffic. By remaining in your structure, you remove yourself from the low-hanging fruit category. However, this requires a sophisticated understanding of static defense. Your home must not look like a bunker. It must look like a void. The amateur board up their windows with fresh plywood, screaming to the world that there is something valuable inside worth protecting. The professional applies the gray man theory to architecture. You want your home to appear already looted, uninteresting, or dangerous to enter. Blackout curtains are mandatory, but external deception is superior. If the lawn is overgrown and the trash cans are overturned, you blend into the entropy of the neighborhood. You want the eyes of the mob to slide past your house, finding no hook to latch onto. Inside the perimeter, you possess the home field advantage, a concept that is statistically decisive in close quarters combat. You know the layout in the dark. You know which walls provide ballistic cover and which are merely concealment. You can establish fatal funnels, narrow entry points like hallways or stairwells where intruders are forced to bunch up, making them easy targets for defensive measures. A defender in a prepared position is worth 5 attackers in the open. You have access to supplies without exposing yourself to the chaotic barter economy of the streets. You can rest in shifts, maintaining a 24-hour security watch, whereas the mobile survivor is exhausted, paranoid, and degrading rapidly in cognitive function. In a civil unrest scenario, fatigue leads to mistakes, and mistakes lead to violence. Your home allows you to manage fatigue. However, defensive fortification has a limit. You must understand the psychology of the siege. If you engage a looter, you must do so decisively and without hesitation, but you must also understand that gunfire, attracts attention. The goal of bugging in during unrest is not to fight a war. It is to remain undetected so you do not have to fight. But if the fight comes to you, the psychological shock of meeting hardened, lethal resistance in a seemingly quiet house often breaks the will of opportunistic looters. They are looking for easy scores, not a firefight. Yet you must be wary of the escalation of force. If the unrest morphs into organized paramilitary cleansing or warlordism, the rules change again. There is one specific weapon that renders all your preparations obsolete and serves as the immediate trigger to abandon the fortress: fire. Fire is the siege breaker. It is the poor man's airstrike. If the mob begins using incendiary devices as a primary tactic, or if a neighboring structure catches fire and the wind is carrying embers toward your roof, the equation flips instantly. You cannot shoot a fire. You cannot reason with a fire. And in a collapse scenario, the fire department is not coming. If you smell smoke or see the orange glow intensifying, your time as a static defender is over. You must execute your escape protocol immediately. This exit must be different from a standard bug out. You are not walking out with a massive backpack that marks you as a supply drop. You are leaving fast, light, and armed, moving through the shadows, avoiding the main arteries you would have driven on. You are transitioning from a king in his castle to a ghost in the ruins. But until that heat is on your face, you hold the line. You stay low, stay quiet, and let the chaos consume those foolish enough to run the gauntlet of the streets. When the grid fails, civilization does not slowly degrade. It unspools instantly. We are not talking about a temporary outage due to a storm. We are analyzing a total systemic collapse of the electrical infrastructure, a grid down scenario. This is the darkness that does not end. In this environment, the most dangerous immediate threat is the information vacuum. The internet, cellular networks, and broadcast systems die within hours as backup batteries drain. Panic thrives in silence. If you choose to bug out in the first 72 hours of a grid-down scenario, you are navigating blindly into a chaotic system. You have no weather reports, no traffic data, and no intelligence on which areas are burning. You are moving efficiently toward your own destruction. The streets will become parking lots of useless steel as vehicles run dry and gas pumps, which require electricity to function, become inert monuments to a dead era. The tactical argument for bugging in during a blackout is rooted in the brutal physics of water and energy. Water weighs 8.3 pounds per gallon. The average human requires a minimum of 1 gallon per day for hydration and basic hygiene. To survive 2 weeks on the road, a family of 4 would need to carry nearly 500 pounds of water. This is mathematically impossible without a vehicle, and in a fuel-starved environment, your vehicle is a liability, not an asset. Your home, conversely, is a reservoir. Even if the municipal taps run dry, your water heater holds 40 to 50 gallons of potable water. Your toilet tanks, your pipes, and your pre-staged storage barrels represent a hydration buffer that allows you to outlast the initial die-off. Leaving this reservoir to scavenge from questionable sources in the wild is a failure of strategic planning. Furthermore, consider the caloric equation. Without climate control, your body burns significantly more energy regulating its core temperature. If it is winter, you burn calories to stay warm. If it is summer, you sweat out electrolytes. In a survival situation, calories are a finite currency. Bugging in allows you to conserve this currency. You can construct microclimates within your home, pitching a tent in the living room to trap body heat, drastically reducing the metabolic cost of survival. On the road, you are fully exposed to the elements, burning through your energy reserves at an accelerated rate, while your access to food is cut off. The static survivor wins because they burn less fuel to stay alive. However, the darkness transforms your home into a different kind of trap. Light discipline becomes the primary law of your existence. In a world of total darkness, a single candle flicker visible through a window acts as a lighthouse for looters. It signals not just presence, but resources. If you have light, you have supplies. You must enforce a strict blackout protocol. Windows must be covered with heavy, opaque material. Cooking must be done during daylight hours or in interior rooms with no exterior sightlines. Smell is another traitor. The scent of cooking food travels for blocks in a neighborhood where everyone else is eating cold beans. You must adapt your consumption habits to be invisible. You are not living in a house anymore. You are living in a submarine running silent and deep. The psychological toll of the blackout is the silent killer. The modern mind is addicted to dopamine hits from digital connectivity. When the screens go black, withdrawal sets in. Boredom morphs into anxiety, and anxiety spirals into paranoia. The silence of the suburbs will be broken by the sounds of violence, which seem louder and closer in the dark. By staying put, you maintain a psychological anchor. You have your books, your familiar surroundings, and a routine. You can sleep in shifts to maintain security without the physical exhaustion of a perimeter patrol in the woods. This mental preservation is just as critical as your water supply. Yet, there is a distinct, non-negotiable trigger that forces you to abandon the blackout fortress: the nuclear factor. Modern nuclear power plants rely on external power to cool their spent fuel rods. If the grid is down for an extended period and the backup diesel generators at regional nuclear facilities fail or run out of fuel, a meltdown is a mathematical certainty. You must possess a Geiger counter and know the location of every reactor within a 50-mile radius of your home. If radiation levels spike, or if reliable intelligence suggests a containment failure, the strategy shifts instantly. You cannot fight radiation with a rifle or a water filter. The invisible fire respects no walls. Additionally, the absolute depletion of water serves as a secondary trigger. If your reservoir runs dry and the surrounding area has been stripped of natural water sources, staying becomes a suicide pact. But this decision must be made before you are too weak to move. You do not wait until the last drop is gone. You calculate your point of no return based on your hydration levels and distance to the next water source. Until that radiation alarm sounds or the water math turns negative, you hold your ground. You embrace the darkness, you stay silent, and you let the cold, dark world pass you by. An economic collapse is not a single event. It is a suffocation. Unlike a bomb that detonates in an instant, hyperinflation and supply chain failure are a slow-motion strangulation of society. The grocery store shelves do not empty because of a panic. They empty because the trucks stop coming. The currency in your wallet does not vanish. It simply ceases to function as a medium of exchange. In this scenario, the bug-out fantasy is particularly absurd. If you flee your home during an economic depression, you are not escaping danger. You are migrating into poverty. You are leaving a location where you have equity, resources, and social capital to become a vagrant in a strange land, where locals are already starving and hostile to outsiders. There is no greener grass on the other side of the collapse. There is only the same hunger in a different zip code. Your home, in this specific theater of operations, transforms from a residence into a warehouse and a bank. When fiat currency collapses, tangible goods become the only real wealth. A can of Spam, a box of ammunition, or a bottle of antibiotics holds more purchasing power than a stack of gold bars or a worthless retirement account. The tactical advantage of bugging in is the ability to protect and manage this wealth. You cannot carry 6 months of food on your back. You cannot carry the tools required to repair gear, filter water, or grow crops. By staying put, you retain possession of the hard assets that define survival when the digital economy evaporates. Your basement is your vault. Protecting it requires a shift in strategy from concealment to community integration. This brings us to the most critical variable in economic survival, the human terrain. The lone wolf dies in an economic collapse because trade is essential for long-term survival. You cannot produce everything you need. You will need to barter. If you are a refugee on the road, you have no leverage and no trust. If you remain in your neighborhood, you have a history. The neighbors you previously ignored are now your most vital tactical asset. A street of occupied houses united by a mutual desire to protect their property is a formidable defensive perimeter. A lone house is a target. A neighborhood watch is a militia. Bugging allows you to build this micro-society. You trade your excess water for their excess tomatoes. You trade your security shift for their medical skills. This social web is the safety net that catches you when your own resources falter. However, you must navigate the politics of envy. As starvation sets in, the gap between the prepared and the unprepared becomes a source of lethal friction. If you were the only family on the block with a generator humming and the smell of bacon wafting from your windows, you are painting a target on your back. You must practice aggressive operational security regarding your logistics. Do not look well-fed. Do not dispose of packaging that reveals you are consuming high-value items. Your trash is intelligence for desperate people. Wear baggy clothes to hide your physical condition. When you interact with the outside world, you must mirror the prevailing misery. You want to appear just as hungry, just as desperate, and just as broke as everyone else. This is strategic poverty. It is the art of hiding your wealth in plain sight to avoid triggering the predatory instincts of the starving masses. The barter economy also introduces a new threat vector, the stranger at the gate. You must establish strict protocols for trade. Never conduct business inside your perimeter. Establish a trading post at the edge of your property or in a neutral location. Never let anyone see the depth of your stockpile. If a trading partner knows you have 10 boxes of medicine, they may decide it is cheaper to kill you and take it all than to trade for one blister pack. Information control is just as important as the inventory control. In an economic collapse, knowledge of your resources is the most dangerous leak you can have. There is, however, a definitive breaking point where the neighborhood fortress becomes a prison. The transition from disorganized crime, looters, to organized crime, warlords, is your signal to evacuate. In the power vacuum of a failed state, local gangs will inevitably evolve into paramilitary organizations. They will begin to claim territory, set up roadblocks, and demand protection taxes from residents. This is the birth of feudalism. When a group with superior firepower and organization demands regular tribute or threatens to seize your property by force, the math changes. You cannot hold out against a platoon-sized element with heavy weapons. If you stay, you become a serf or a corpse. Furthermore, if the economic collapse leads to a total breakdown of local sanitation and utility infrastructure that triggers a secondary biological hazard you cannot manage, or if the social hostility in your specific region targets your demographic or group specifically, you must leave. The trigger is the loss of sovereignty. As soon as you can no longer control the entry and exit of your own domain due to overwhelming external force, the strategy of bugging in has failed. You must then initiate your exit protocol, leaving the heavy assets behind to save the biological ones. You move from the bank vault to the life raft, accepting the poverty of the road over the slavery of the occupation. Survival is not a static state, it is a fluid adaptation to shifting variables. While the fortress of your home provides the highest probability of survival in the majority of scenarios, clinging to it when the tactical reality has inverted is a fatal error. You must possess a rigid, unemotional set of red lines, a mental checklist that, when crossed, triggers an immediate, non-negotiable evacuation. Review these triggers now and etch them into your operational doctrine. Fire. If the structure is compromised by flames or threatened by an uncontrollable firestorm, you leave immediately. Biological breach. If your quarantine is irreversibly contaminated or the local water supply becomes a chemical hazard, you leave. Radiation. If a meltdown occurs or radiation levels spike above survivable thresholds, you leave. Loss of sovereignty. If an organized paramilitary force demands tribute or threatens overwhelming violence you cannot repel, you leave. When one of these lines is crossed, you do not hesitate. You execute the exit protocol. This is the fundamental difference between a refugee and a strategist. A refugee runs in panic, grabbing random items unsure of their destination. A strategist executes a pre-planned withdrawal. This brings us to the 15-minute rule. From the moment the decision is made, you must be capable of exiting your perimeter, fully loaded, armed, and mobile, within 15 minutes. This means your go bags are not hypothetical lists. They are packed, weighed, and staged by the door. Your vehicle is not empty. It is fueled and positioned nose out. Your route is not a guess. It is a primary path with 2 alternates memorized by every member of your group. If you cannot leave in 15 minutes, you are already dead. The delay caused by searching for keys, packing clothes, or debating the route is the friction that kills. Speed is security. Once you step outside, you transition instantly from the king in the castle to the gray man. You move fast, you move quietly, and you move away from population centers. You are trading the protection of walls for the protection of distance. In conclusion, the debate between bugging in and bugging out is not a question of preference. It is a brutal mathematical calculation. Your home is a force multiplier that conserves energy, protects resources, and provides psychological armor. It is the logical choice for 90% of collapse scenarios. But you must never fall in love with your fortress. It is merely a tool. Use it to keep you alive as long as it functions. The moment it becomes a coffin, you must have the discipline to walk away and face the wild. Survival is not about bravery. It is about being in the right place at the right time and knowing exactly when that place has changed.